All right, let's dive in. You've seen it everywhere, right? From corporate wellness programs to your kids' elementary school, meditation is a huge deal. It's often pitched as this magic bullet for, well, everything. But what does the science actually say? Now, if you're a clinician, you've probably had patients asking about it. And for you, separating the real evidence from all that hype isn't just a good idea, it's absolutely essential. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to take a hard, evidence-based look behind all those headlines.
Look, the excitement around mindfulness is totally understandable. I mean, some of those early studies were really exciting. But here's the thing. As the research has gotten more sophisticated, a healthy dose of skepticism has started to bubble up, and it's coming from inside the scientific community. Researchers are now going back and really kicking the tires on those initial claims, asking a tough question. Has all the public buzz just gotten way ahead of the actual data?
And what's so telling is that this call for caution isn't coming from the fringes. We're talking about the top minds in the field. A group of 15 leading psychologists and neuroscientists got together. They reviewed hundreds of studies, and at the end of it all, they basically made this powerful plea for truth in advertising by contemplative neuroscience. That phrase just nails it, doesn't it? And it perfectly sets the tone for what we're about to cover. A straight-up, honest look at what the evidence shows, and just as importantly, what it doesn't.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to break down why the hype got so far ahead of the science. Then, we'll get into what the evidence really shows are the solid benefits. After that, we'll see how meditation stacks up against other treatments, face some of the real risks and unanswered questions, and then we'll wrap it all up with some practical guidance you can actually use with patients.
All right, let's jump into that first part. Hype outpaces the science. So where did things get a little wobbly? Well, you can think of it like this. A lot of that early excitement was built on a scientific foundation that, well, it turned out to be a bit shaky. Now, that doesn't mean we tear the whole building down, not at all. But it does mean we absolutely have to understand why we need to look at everything with a much more critical eye now.
And this right here, this is the heart of the problem. So many of those early studies just had some major design flaws. We're talking poor research designs, really small groups of people, which makes the results kind of unreliable, and honestly, even the word mindfulness was often super vague. And then you've got all the bias, like self-selection bias. Think about it. Are the people who are drawn to meditation and stick with it maybe just different from the get-go? And don't even get me started on confounding factors, things like education level or how much someone exercises. Those things also impact our well-being, so it's really hard to tease out if the benefits were coming from meditation alone.
Okay, so after all that criticism, you might be thinking, is there anything solid here? And the answer is yes. So let's put on that critical lens and look at where the science actually is pretty strong. Because despite all those research issues, there's a clear, consistent signal starting to emerge in a few key areas. And this is where we, as healthcare professionals, can start to feel a lot more confident.
So when you sift through all the noise, the really strong evidence seems to bunch up in three main spots. First up, sharpened attention. And this just makes sense, right? A lot of meditation is literally training your attention. The data shows it can help you wander off less in your thoughts, and it fights against habituation. You know, that thing our brain does where it just starts tuning out the world around us. Second, increased resiliency to stress. It seems meditation can actually help your mind and body bounce back faster after something stressful happens. It does this, in part, by kind of turning down the volume on the amygdala, which is like the brain's little alarm system. And third, enhanced compassion. Specifically, practices like loving-kindness meditation have been shown to genuinely increase a person's willingness to step up and help someone who's suffering.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. The brain changes we see in people who've been meditating for a long time suggest that these benefits aren't just a temporary feeling you get while you're meditating. They can actually become trait-like. What does that mean? It means they can become a built-in, default part of who you are, fundamentally changing how you deal with stress or pay attention, even when you're just going about your day.
Okay, but now it's time for a really important reality check. Let's get clinical. A patient walks into your office and asks, "Hey, should I just meditate instead of going to therapy or taking my meds?" What do you say? This is where the evidence forces us to be incredibly clear. Meditation is absolutely not a panacea.
To get our answer, we can look at this huge, landmark meta-analysis from 2014 in JAMA Internal Medicine. This thing was a beast. It crunched the numbers from 47 different randomized controlled trials. And when they put mindfulness meditation head-to-head against other active treatments, we're talking things like therapy, exercise, or medication, the result was crystal clear. For anxiety and depression, meditation was not shown to be any more beneficial. It helps, for sure, but it doesn't beat the established treatments.
And this chart breaks it down even further. So that same massive study, it found that the effects for anxiety and depression were, at best, small to moderate. Okay, but what about for things like boosting a positive mood or helping with substance use? The evidence was either low or just plain insufficient. And for helping with eating habits or sleep, no evidence of an effect, zero. This is so important for us to know so we can manage our patients' expectations.
So, what's the bottom line here? The big takeaway for any clinician is this: meditation should be considered an adjunct to treatment, not a replacement for it. Think of it as a really useful tool you can add to the toolbox, but it's rarely, if ever, the only tool you should be using.
All right, next step we have to talk about something that often gets swept under the rug: the risks and the big unanswered questions. The popular story out there is that meditation is 100% safe and always good for you, but the research is starting to paint a much more complicated picture. Plus, there are some really basic practical questions that we just don't have good answers for yet.
So let's just tackle a huge assumption head-on. Is meditation always a calming, blissful experience? Is that what a patient should expect? The short answer? Absolutely not. In fact, we're now seeing documented research on some pretty challenging experiences. We're talking about things like intense fear, anxiety, even panic attacks. Some people report feeling emotionally numb or becoming extremely sensitive to light and sound. And listen, this is the part every single clinician needs to hear loud and clear. This isn't just something that happens to people with pre-existing trauma. These adverse effects can happen to anyone.
Okay, another big unanswered question is about standardization. We throw around the word meditation like it's a single thing. It's not. It's like saying, take medicine. You'd immediately ask, which medicine? It's the same here. Different techniques seem to do different things. A body scan, for instance, appears to be great for increasing body awareness and dialing down negative thoughts. Loving kindness practice, that really shines when it comes to boosting positive feelings toward other people. And observing your thoughts seems best for just becoming more aware of them without judgment. The specific technique really matters.
And all of this leads to probably the number one question you're going to get from a patient. So, how much do I have to do? Right? Is 10 minutes a day enough? Should it be an hour once a week? What's the recommended dose?
And the honest, scientifically backed answer right now is we have no idea. Seriously, unlike exercise where we have clear guidelines, there is no CDC-style recommendation for meditation. We just don't have the data yet to say what the ideal dose, the best duration or frequency really is.
So, we've looked at the good stuff, the limitations, the risks, and all the things we don't know. The big question now is, how do we put all of this together to give our patients responsible, evidence-based advice? And that brings us to our final section, guidance for clinical practice.
So since we don't have a one-size-fits-all prescription, the best way forward is to frame this as a personal experiment, a path of self-discovery. The goal is for the patient to figure out what works for them. So encourage them to try out different types of meditation, maybe a body scan one week, loving kindness the next. Have them play around with different durations and times of day. But here's the most important part. Tell them to just jot down a quick note about how they feel before and after they practice. This simple step helps them become their own scientist, creating a personal feedback loop to see what's actually making a difference.
All right, let's wrap this all up. Here are the key takeaways for you as a clinician. Number 1. The strongest evidence we have is for sharpening attention and building resilience to stress. 2. This is an adjunct to treatment, not a replacement. Don't forget that. 3. Be aware of the potential for adverse effects and actually talk to your patients about them. 4. The best advice you can give is to guide them to experiment for themselves and track what they find. And finally, as a scientific community, we desperately need bigger and better studies to get the clear answers we're all looking for.
And that really is the future of this research. The conversation needs to shift. We have to stop asking this simple, kind of useless question: does meditation work? That's not the point anymore. The real question, the one that's actually useful for our patients, is way more personalized. What specific practice, at what dose, works best for the specific person, and why? Figuring that out, that is the next great frontier. Thanks so much for tuning in.